came across the fact that we spend up to 90 to 125,000 hours working in our lifetime. And when you math that out, that's 33 years of a person's life. That's 2/3 of your waking hours. And that was the true realization for me. That was the catalyst to start to actually design habits, design routines, and design mindsets that, gave me my freedom back.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Welcome to Bold Encounters. I have with me today Kason Morris. And we have a common friend, Danielle Latif. She does PR, and she reached out to me. And I don't usually read those emails very much, but she did a terrific job. And I went and looked you up. And oh my word, you're so focused on the same topic I am with this show. I kept reading. I found out you wrote a book. I thought I need to find out. So she sent me some info, and here we are. And I'm thrilled. Yes. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for making the connection, Mark, and listening to Danielle in that regard. Because I think the messages are super important, and it's great to be able to have these kinds of conversations. So I'm feeling great and inspired.
Yeah. I want to give a little more introduction, which I don't usually do, but I feel like we're like brothers across the continent doing the same cause. So I'm going to introduce another couple of things that I thought were really interesting about you. Not only did you write a book, it's called Life Work Revolution. What a perfect title for that. But it's really about, finding your place outside ultimately the big company and the big institution. And also finding, unless that's your soul and your place, and there are, minority people that like that organization life, and so I'm all for it. I loved my times in those big companies, but I did like the entrepreneurship better for sure. But you also, it's about finding your purpose as a leader, at least of your own work and maybe other people's work, and even the whole business world's work in some capacity. And then I love the word thrive. I use it all the time. I really believe in that word for a million reasons. I'll spare you, but I know you believe in it, and you'll tell us your version. Thriving beyond just like the 9 to 5 and just getting a paycheck. That's what this is. We're trying to do that with this show, and you're the perfect guest for what we're doing. So thanks for being here. Let's start at the beginning. We're going to get to some really practical things to make your career super fulfilling, and you've got some amazing ideas on how to Monday when someone goes to work, their work is going to be better because you've got some things that you can give them at the end that they really can make their work life better. But right now I want to go to your life. I want to go back to the beginning and tell me about, I know a little bit about it, but tell the audience about your childhood life and some of the perspectives and things like that. Let's just start at the beginning of you for a minute.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to share that story. For me, I'm an 80s and 90s kid. I grew up in the poorest congressional district in the Bronx in New York City. From a working class family. And when you think about what New York City represented around that time, on paper, based on my background, I should have been a statistic. But even as a kid, I could feel that something wasn't right. And I could feel like the idea that the systems and circumstances around me didn't make me feel safe and didn't make me feel seen. And so around that time, I used to get into watching shows, and I would watch all these really interesting shows like The Cosby Show, Full House, things that were very sort of family centric, safe feeling. And it got me thinking, it's like, why doesn't my life look like that? And I expected those around me to kind of show up differently in that way. So when, for whatever reason or another, when they didn't, even at that young age, I started to make a decision that I had to figure this out for myself. And this was my first step into this idea of like thinking about how the systems work with you or against you. And it was my first instinct at even at a young age to start to make the decision to say that I'm going to design around the systems that weren't built for me. I didn't trust what was handed to me at that time. So I started betting on myself to create something different. And that led me to making sure I was, successful in my academics, which led me into, full scholarships from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then from there into a very productive corporate venture and corporate career.
Yeah, I have no concept, no empathy, no appreciation for a childhood in the lowest income Bronx neighborhood. I just have no idea about it, frankly. Um, I have to assume that it felt as you went to school like the purpose of the school was just to kind of get through the day. Was there a little of that, or what was that like? Tell those of us that haven't gone to school in the lowest income
I mean,
Bronx school.
100%. I think as a kid, you always find things that work. You make the best of what is. Um, but with that being said, it was a different set of rules and a different time. So even though you could find those certain joys, at the same time it was a constant state of like tension and just navigating situations that you didn't belong in just because of the area that you lived in. So very very interesting time for sure.
Probably a rough time. You mentioned that you looked at the families. You said, why isn't my life turning out like that? Tell us a little bit about your childhood family and some of the feelings and what you reformatted your ideals to be, or whatever you want to say about that.
Yeah, I think how I was brought up, it definitely influenced my life today as a father of four, and a husband, and my family. I was raised between households, so I got to see different sides of different worlds between my mom and my dad, and they both had a working relationship, and I also gained and learned a lot from them. But when you're in a separate home, it creates its own sort of challenges in relation to the opportunities and examples that you may see. So around that time, I was into a lot of like TV and things to pass the times. And as you know, those who you're influenced by what the media shows you, you see all these other things, anything, in relation to family shows, in relation to games, toys, movies. The whole point is it kind of puts you into this fantasy world of like, that's what good looks like. So it took me down this path of saying like, hey, I fell in love with the idea of the whole family, of the nuclear family, and that was the safe space and place for me to feel seen and protected. And when I recognized that wasn't a part of my design at that time, it allowed me to shift and think about like, well, how do I put myself in position so that I can build that for myself when I'm a grown up and when it's time for me to lead a family of my own.
Yeah, wow, that's a profound thought. I have spent time thinking a little bit about the same thing. I lost my father, came home when I was 13 and announced he had been diagnosed with cancer, and soon after, pretty soon after died. And so I grew up with a mother who hadn't even gone to college because she had to raise a bunch of kids, and back when that was the model. And she was forced back in the workforce. I was the youngest, and I wish that my dad didn't die. And I wish that I had both of them in my life in those incredibly formative years. The reason I tell you a little bit about my story is because I want to ask you this, and that is, we spend a lot of time in society defining the edges of something so that we
Yeah.
can see the boundaries, and so it's something. You got to know where a noun begins and ends, or it's not a noun, so to speak. Every object has a border of reality, and so we spend a lot of time in these modern years talking about the edges, and it's kind of taboo to talk about a nuclear family. But I
Yeah.
gotta say, I wish I had mom and dad there through junior high and high school and early college, at least, helping me both out in their ways, in their complementary ways. I think I hear you saying that that's what you wished you had, a magic wand, and you're trying to build ultimately. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Like, these are the people that you care about, the people that you look up to. These are the people that you model. And part of your need as a child, and especially in those formative moments like you mentioned, is to have your role models there guiding you in those moments. Luckily enough, I was able to get that in my own way, but it just wasn't connected. It wasn't the collective idea. So I do agree with you that now it almost seems taboo, but who wouldn't want to have their parents together and feeling that kind of safety and opportunity in one single home.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean anything else is a problem or wrong. It's not
Hmm.
bad it is bad when my dad dies, but ultimately there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. But I have some deep, deep feelings about all of this because of it, which I'm really grateful for, ironically. And so it doesn't mean your parents did anything terrible. It just means that why not, like you say. So anyway, that's a great perspective. I know it was tough on you to do that before you built it for yourself, and it caused some ripples in your life. Tell us about some of the hardest things you've ever faced.
Yeah. So like when you think about, like, when I going back to the whole idea of systems and thinking about, like, how do I create something different. Where that kind of led me was this idea that, if systems weren't built to serve me, then, how do I create something that will? So I followed the path that I thought I was supposed to follow based on the best information that I had, which was about, what do I do to lead myself to success? Go to college, get the degree, climb up the corporate ladder, get the promotions, and put all of that first and forward. And with each step, that I pushed harder and further, it it just left me feeling more close to that idea of burnout, and actually pretty empty, because you start to achieve things, and I didn't get that feeling of fulfillment that I sought, and I kept chasing that idea, and it actually had a greater cost than what I personally anticipated, where I hit a point in my career where everything looked really great on paper, but I wound up going through burnout. I also wound up going through a messy divorce and a broken marriage, because at the end of the day, I found myself chasing a version of success that looked good on paper, but didn't feel good to actually live.
Yeah. At quite a young age too. So
Yeah.
sorry, that's tough. And that was part of your impetus to design what you wanted to start again. Tell us a little bit about that. Like what this terrible thing threw you into design, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just it was just a consequence, and it was a very hard lesson, and I'm grateful for it, because that's when I started asking those bigger questions, like questions like, why is it always about, trying to find work life balance? Because I tried really hard. I was like, hey, I believe in being a partner. I believe in having that nuclear household. I believe in all these things, and I need to provide for my family. But then it forced me to really start to look at even that term. You know, when you think about work life, right? Why is it not life work? Meaning, why does work come first? Because when you think about it in the language, work life balance, first of all, balance is a false dichotomy because you very rarely find equality in things. And when you think about work life, it predisposes you to the idea that, well, your life is defined by what you do. And so around that time, I really just took claim and just dug into all this research on like personal development, professional development, all those kinds of things. And I came up across some facts that were very sobering for me. You know, I came across the fact that we spend up to 90 to 125,000 hours working in our lifetime.
Hmm.
And when you math that out, that's 33 years of a person's life. And to make that even more interesting, when you break that down into waking hours, that's 2/3 of your waking hours.
Hmm.
And so I had to ask myself, I was like, I didn't want to spend those hours feeling empty and unfulfilled in my work. And I looked at how my old way of doing things, what it cost me. And that was the true realization for me. That was the catalyst to start to actually design habits, design routines, and design mindsets that, you know, gave me my freedom back, gave me a sense of purpose. So those 2/3 of my waking hours were really, you know, more fulfilling. And that's what I call life work design.
Yeah.
It's essentially a method to build a life that you don't need to escape from, where your work becomes a tool that empowers your life and not the thing that defines or drains it.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that the design idea of your future and your work life to swap it for life's work. A couple of thoughts. One is that once I did the math in a slightly different way, and if you do what you're saying, you can cut that down to 50% of waking hours, and some of that 50% can be snuck in when the whole family is doing something that you're not invited to do, or when you've got a lot of time even in a busy family life where you have a half hour, 15 minutes to make a phone call in between things while you're waiting for everyone to get in the car or something. And the other thought that once upon a time when I published a magazine when I was young, I had the opportunity to spend the day with Dr. Laura. And you know, if you're younger than 40 or 50, you probably don't even know who she was. But she was the second most successful radio personality ever. She was really sharply careful and even conservative, not necessarily politically, but family and morally and such. And I asked her this exact question. I said, my gosh, you've got these New York Times bestsellers. You have this $70 million radio show. How do and you've got a child and you're married. Like, how do you achieve work-life balance? And she snapped at me. Like, she was feisty, as those that have heard her remember. And she said, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. That's a ridiculous notion. There's just life. And life is what you make of it. And if you decide to not get up at 4:30 and write a book, well, I can't help you. But that's what I decide to do. I only write before I take my own child to school, and that's the only time I write on my books.
Yep.
Wow. Anyway, so she designed it, man. That was quite an extreme version of what you're saying.
No,
But
but it's right. It's absolutely spot on, and that's what it's about. It's about reclaiming that. It's about flipping the script. And how do you use your time how you want to. You reclaim that time. You reclaim that energy. You reclaim that direction. You
yeah.
know, so that's what it's about. And I even moved away from the term balance, and that's why I think about things in like seasons because they ebb and flow. Or whether you're a parent, an employee, an entrepreneur, you know, all those things are interchangeable. It's just about knowing what season you're in and then deciding how you show up for life.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna keep talking about you and your philosophy and your work for a second, but I want to tease a little bit at the end. I want to add to your subconscious a question for later, and
Okay.
that is how does this philosophy affect your relationships with your daughters, and how should a parent think about that in practical to-do terms in a week? Like, I'm going to ask you some practical to-dos for work and for life's work at the end. But I want to ask you first, I want to ask you about this next phase. You went to work for a big company, and it has pros and cons. Tell me a little bit about your thinking on the big company and this and how it works into this.
Yeah, I've been working for big companies, high growth startups. The last 5 years of my career has actually been working for pretty large companies across different industries. So fun fact about me is I've been able to make pivots into 6 different industries, and I've done that using like sort of 10 strategic kind of pivots in that journey, and it wasn't by accident. It's all been by design. So what I do now and what I've done in the last half of my career has been this really radical curiosity around the principles of how do we help people do more? How do we think about people's well-being in the workplace?
Yeah.
And I've been able to focus on future of work kinds of initiatives with a focus on AI, org design, talent systems, and really the end state of that is how do you make these workplaces better for the future of what's next. And so it's been a very complementary journey to the idea that if I said systems didn't work for me, how do you create a better system externally? But then at the same time, through my coaching and my businesses and my methods, how do I help people individually create better systems from the inside out? So then these two things kind of come together and just create a better world of work for all, even in these trying, uncertain times. So that's part of the reason why I continue to do that work, and it's a part of the reason why I show up, because it gives me energy because I understand my why. And when you're able to do that, when you're able to figure out like what's good enough in relation to your role as a parent and in your household or with your partner, and what's good enough as a professional, then you can keep tapping into energy that allows you to show up versus going the other way where you just keep giving and you get burnt out. So I've been really intentional about the kind of work that I do in these large company systems. So then that way they're not just taking from me, but they're giving to me because that work aligns with my purpose and my vision and my soul.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people talk about leaving the big company and being an entrepreneur or having a side hustle
Mm-hmm.
and treating and I've even done a little of this where you treat your day job to the minimum when you're in the mode of launching something else. But since becoming independent, I've gained a different perspective in my memory, and it's about what a platform
Mm-hmm.
that a big company can be. Like, there is definitely overlap with what's in someone's mind and soul and what the company wants to have happen. It might even be tiny, but there's some. And there's budget there that you don't have personally, because big
Mm-hmm.
companies have big budgets somewhere. And it might take a little extra selling internally to get something to happen. It may take a little bit of your own time to plan something, but you have connections. I mean, those are people not just with job titles in the company. They're
Yeah.
human beings with personal networks and personal brands, and some of that has overlap, and some of those people have similar interests. And I'm really fascinated by what Danielle told me a little bit about how you actually got started giving advice. Will you tell us that story? I think that's really a great part of this.
Yeah, so part of what you mentioned is this whole idea of telling your story and navigating your story. And so for me, one of the ways I was able to actually build this business and build this brand while continuing to do executive work has been sharing my story, has been going to public venues and forums and building my network in a way where I'm giving value. And then as a result of that, it's a multiplier because I'm getting value not only as an individual, but I'm also reaching and connecting with peers and other leaders to the point that you mentioned that have access to projects, to opportunities. And it's not that's not what I necessarily sought, but it was the mindset of understanding that, my career and my job is an investor in me just as much as I am an investor in it. And when people take that mindset of saying like, hey, my role is an investment, and how do I create this win-win and good enough? And then how do I share my story at scale in ways that not only helps people but can become a multiplier for me? This is the kind of stuff that pays you back forever. And because I started doing that, and partnering with someone like Danielle, it allowed me to also start a speaking business because I had so many different lessons, and so many different stories from an almost 2-decade career of empowering hundreds of thousands of employees across different kinds of industries. And you start to see the patterns. People are human. People need help. And it just allowed me a way to give back. And in that giving back, it turned what may seem like a very sort of narrow pocket of this is my work, this is my job, into what I think is going to be important for most of us, into like a portfolio. And that's the new wave I think that careers are going to go into. It's like it allows you to be diversified and also find energy in other things and other ways to give back, but then also either earn a wage or just expand your network. And that's something that I've never forgotten. It's that idea of truly that your network to net worth. It's not just about networking and exchanging cards, but understanding the idea that if you want to do something, if you want to try something, if you're curious, whether you're an employee in a big corporate, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you have a side hustle, how you connect with people and how you share your stories are the things that are going to pay you back.
It's everything. Like, I think it's so undervalued, and certainly by me multiple times. And now it is not undervalued, and I seek to be a professional at just that specific skill you just did. It's hard, it takes some data management, it takes some effort, it takes time, it takes creativity and thinking, it takes love, it takes, and yet that is also an investment. And it feels like when we give people advice, it's like they sometimes feel like it's one of the things that should happen. It's top. Like, life is relationships, and like you say, it's about the end value. Really, it's going to produce everything practically. I love, before we get on to advice about that specific thing too, I'd like to hear about when you first felt confident enough and why you felt confident. I love that story too, where why you would even dare to give someone else advice way back when the world had some challenges.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about this iteration of my brand and my business, it really came together as a result of COVID. So I've had consulting practices and businesses before, but they didn't really quite land anywhere. And as I spoke about my story earlier and the change, and as I started to become this designer and an architect of my career, when COVID happened, I had lots of friends in senior director, VP positions who were all falling off of their ivory towers and their sense of security because the world was on fire. People didn't really know what to do and what was happening next. But at the same time, for me, I was getting promotions. I was making pivots that allowed me to double my income, and not only double my income, but to get like 5-figure performance bonuses, like doing all the things that were contrary to what was happening in the market.
Amazing.
And I had friends ask me like, well, what's so different about what you're doing, and how can you help me do that? And then I thought about it, and a lot of what I'm like distilling for with you today is I started thinking about, my life and my work in systems, and I recognized that my work wasn't my identity, that it was a tool, and that freedom requires systems. And because I started becoming so intentional, and I started knowing how to tell my story around what my skills were, I created my own asset class, and I started looking at work in relation to opportunities to create alignment, where I could do great work, and I had skill sets and opportunities that essentially were rare, valuable, and durable, so that even when the world around us was falling, I was an indispensable asset in what I was doing. And from there, that's how I started really taking this coaching component a bit more seriously, and just helping people, and just putting together methods and frameworks that I know worked for me and have worked for others over time. And the last point I'll make about this is when you think about these ideas, you know, what was really the catalyst for me was it was design thinking. I worked in jobs where I managed product teams and marketing teams, and I saw all these different models. And for those that don't know me or follow me, my career in as an executive in HR has been all around talent and organization performance. So it's like, how do I make people do more and do better and feel like they're thriving at work? And when you think of what happens with any innovation, innovation is rarely like a net new thing. It's more
Hmm.
about how do you apply an old thing in a new way. And
Hmm.
so as I stepped into this idea of becoming the designer and the architect, I'm working with product teams, using systems thinking, using design thinking, and I said, hey, this doesn't apply to just work. This applies to my life too.
Yeah.
And I started to think about, how do I apply this to my family life, my health, my relationships, my work. And I lived what I taught, and I live what I'm teaching today. And the driver behind that is because my daughters are watching, and I believe in modeling those behaviors. But since that point, that was really just the catalyst. It was that idea of like, wow, I'm doing something and I didn't quite know what to call it, but I felt the call to just want to help people survive a very challenging time. And that's what led to me, developing and publishing my book, and led to me doing what I'm doing today, outside of my 9 to 5 role with life work design.
Yeah, as one of your audience, I think you're teaching another subtle lesson, but I want to just point out the irony, which is a beautiful, kind of funny thing, but really meaningful too. That the irony of you extending beyond work and pulling in all the other aspects, and having a structured way to think about those things that's proven, and you've got all these resources to back it and experience now trying it experimentally, and the irony that that's actually the fuel that gets an employee to do better in the
Mhm.
big company. It's all, if they don't have their sense of purpose and their passion for something that
Yep.
aligns somewhat with what we're trying to do. Wow, it's a lot of productivity left on the table. So you're creating this thing that's outside work. You're going to executives inside work. You're helping them by helping them outside and inside. And it's such a beautiful thing because it's you're creating this new value for all of these really important people in a big multi-billion-dollar company. And I love the idea that you were shining. I mean, you were a light, and you weren't hiding it. People were coming and being drawn to the light and saying, hey, what the expletive is going on with you and your promotions and your raises and things. It's an amazing thing. The little lesson that I'm seeing is that, you know, and see if this is a question for you, because this might just be my thinking and my bias, but I think you might be a fish not seeing the water because you've had this experience in product land, not just HR. And it is this, that when you say, oh, that's really important, whatever it is, let's say a hobby life or a family life like we've been talking about, and someone like you starts thinking about it, you start thinking about frameworks and steps and how to plan for it and make it work, and that's what people that have written books like you do, and people that have created models like you do, and then the intention to make it commercial forces you to up your game. Like, you know, there's a million people in corporate America that are doing mentoring, quote unquote, where their boss says, hey, go mentor someone, and it's kind of haphazard, it's not that valuable. But someone like you that's saying, no, I've got to do everything it can and involve all the people I need to make this commercial. The act of making something a product that succeeds out there is such a high bar that you have to take it very seriously and put it together well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would, but I would also add and encourage anyone listening is that's just it. If you start to think about yourself, your knowledge, your skills, your experiences as products, it's the brand of you that you have the permission to bet on yourself. And it's just about making that mindset shift to think about, like, well, how can I make this more serious? How can I diversify? How can I use this in a different way? And that's through my coaching, my community, and the things that I pull together. That's what I do. I create space for people to think a little bit differently, because there are so many brilliant people out there in the world with great experiences and great skills. I mean, you think about it, right? Even earlier this week, Microsoft let go of 6,000 employees. I knew some of them, and these are brilliant, accomplished people, right? So when you think about what that means, and there are a number of different things going on in the market and companies that are shifting all the time. But the lesson that I think people should take away from that is that you can still be gone overnight. And it's like, meanwhile, the organization is posting record profits. So when you think about the lessons, it's like your success alone in your role won't save you. And this perception of loyalty won't necessarily protect you. So it's like you have to start thinking about, how do you design and leverage on purpose? And you're not waiting for a layoff. You're not waiting for permission. And that's the unlock that I think helps individuals navigate what's going on now. But then it also helps companies, because if you have talent like that inside your organization, it's going to innovate, it's going to create productivity, it's going to do all the things that you ultimately want your people to do.
Yeah, it's a powerful point. I mean, the value to a person, any person at any level in a big company, is how well they do the bullets on their job description. It's not about how amazing they are at creating new tools necessarily, unless that's specifically their job. But I love what you're saying. You're kind of saying, like, when people came to you and said, hey, what's up? You were someone that knew what you just said already and had crafted it. And so you were bringing steel tools, hammers, screwdrivers in a toolbox. You weren't just showing up to a mentoring meeting with raw metal rocks. You had commercialized and made them tools for others to use, and they were serious and formidable and high level, not just ideas to exchange as a bright human being. And that's what, when you're one of those 6,000 people, you better have tools that translate outside the walls of your organization and
Yeah.
not just some raw metal that you think is awesome.
No, a hundred percent. And I love, I love explaining this in this way. So I love the fact that you anchor it in on like tools, right?
Yeah,
Because when I even think about, given what I do as a future of work executive, I'm thinking about like what are the skills of the future? How are skills? How do you create a skills based, skills informed organization? What is AI doing to disrupt people's like skills and capabilities? And what I try to explain about how you develop and how do you build your tool set is like don't think about your skills or your tool set as it being like here are my hard skills, here are my soft skills, here are my technical skills. Think about it in relation to being what's durable and what's rare and valuable versus what's perishable and
yeah,
can easily go out the door. So again, agnostic of the role that you're in, if you think about your growth and the product that's you in relation to what's durable, what's perishable, what energizes me, what de-energizes me, now it's going to start to give you that blueprint, that roadmap in relation to what you focus on. And even make it super simple. I explain it like, hey, you have your toolbox and your groceries. The toolbox is like the hammer, the nails, the screwdriver, the saw. These are the things that you go back to again and again.
mm,
They're durable. They help you when you got to do a new project. Whereas the groceries, they matter because you have to eat.
sure,
You need the fuel, but like groceries, if you have vegetables or eggs or milk, they eventually expire. They eventually spoil. There's more turnover. So when you start thinking about like what's really gonna help you, it's that mix of my tools and my groceries. You want to have really good groceries that keep you healthy and relevant. You want to have really solid tools that you can come back to over and over again to keep figuring out whatever it is you're going to build next.
mm. It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, before I get you to the hardcore practical advice for people in their own life's work, tell me about your family. You've got 4 daughters, and what is all this philosophy and work and doing 2 different things at the same time? Tell me how it's enriched or been a challenge, or tell me about your current life with those wonderful girls and your
Yeah,
new wife.
I mean it's great. I mean when I think about it, you know, my most important team is my daughters. You know, I'm a father of four. My oldest is 16, it's 16 years old. I have two middles that are 11 and soon to be 9 respectively. And then I have a baby that's 4 years old.
Mm,
And being a girl dad and that male prototype like it means so much to me, not only as in the role of father, but I also am trying to model and show them that, you know, you can live your life how you see fit. You can do all these different kinds of things. And part of the reason why I do all the things that I do is so that I can be more present with them. I can show them that there are different pathways to what success is. And that means the world to me. And they do all kinds of things to, you know, enrich themselves in what they do, whether it's school related activities, whether it's outside of school related activities, like karate, tennis, things like that. And we figure it all out. Like it's just a system. Like I said earlier, and I keep hammering this home because it's not always about like, oh, this is perfect or it motivates you or I'm feeling great every single day. But it's like when you have a strong why and you have good habits, then the system works for itself. And my kids are a representative of that for me. They see how hard I work. They understand why I do this work. And in some ways they actually even help me do the
mm,
work. And I think that's a very different way of thinking when I think about like traditional sort of images I thought of parenting and the roles that parents play, like these stoic kinds of figures, and I'm trying to frame that a little bit differently for them, and it means the world to me, and that's why I said that's my favorite team, and
that's
always will be.
awesome. And your wife, the mother of these girls, how has your design for family affected that?
Yeah, I mean it's been a really strong and a really solid partnership. So one of the things we were able to do in living under these principles is my wife is now an entrepreneur. She used to work in finance. She used to be a VP of finance in banking, and so we have a series of family businesses that are very real. And as a part of our design to make sure that we had more time with our family and we're able to create that environment that allows us to thrive both in life and in work. During my designing and my building of my career, we hit a point where she was able to essentially retire herself from corporate and leverage some of her skills to start businesses that support our family organization, and that allows her to be more present and more active at home in relation to, like, being there for the kids. And for me, in relation to my work, I made this choice several years back, even before COVID and remote work and return to office and all the things you hear about today. Is I already had designed the idea that I could be a hybrid remote worker.
Mm.
So I spend a majority of my working time within the walls of our family home. And so all of that intentionality is what allows us to kind of ebb and flow and support each other, both as partners and as parents to our daughters.
Partners and parents. I love that. Love it. That's what the big adventure in life is, in my opinion, is that one. Okay, let's get to some really seriously practical to-dos for people that want to take some action and head in your direction. Before we get into the work stuff, let me ask you this. If someone is young and they're, I've got at the bottom end of my listenership, I've got some high school seniors and some college freshmen, and they're in a life with a family that's not exactly as they'd like. But what was your advice to them this week? What should they do to turn that mindset or that reality around?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way I would frame it is this kind of thinking applies to anyone at any stage. And when you think about those who are younger and just graduating high school or going into college or just graduating college, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to figure out, like, what's life right now, and what does that mean, and how do I sort of create success for myself. So my recommendation and real practical advice is think about, like, what is good enough for now.
Mm.
What is good enough for now? So sometimes we have very lofty ideas about what our expectations are. Like, oh, I should have a salary and I'm making this amount of money. I should have this kind of goal. I should be in this kind of shape. And it's good to have those goals, but without understanding what your baseline is, you'll never truly achieve that goal. And what I'll say in good enough for now is another term that might be sound counterproductive, but it makes a ton of sense. Is that you set the bar low.
Mm.
So what I mean by set the bar low is when you decide what's good enough for now and it's achievable and sustainable, you do it over and over again. It's like, hey, I want to run a marathon, but I know I can't just get up and get outside and run a marathon right this second.
And
I
sprint it.
and sprint through it. So
Yeah.
what am I going to do? I'm going to say, you know what? Hey, at least for an hour a day, 30 minutes a day, I'm going to walk. I'm going to find 30 minutes to walk every single day. And then you start doing that, and then you're going to say, hey, I'm going to find 45 minutes in a couple weeks. Okay. Now I'm going to find another 15, and now I'm walking for an hour, and I'm building up my endurance. Okay, I'm going to jog a half an hour. So it's like you're doing these incremental things that are allowing you to build up confidence and build up routine. And then guess what? Before you know it, you take a stab at that marathon. And you're going to do a lot better than you would have if you put all that pressure on yourself at that point to say, hey, I need to run a marathon. So that's how I try to like break things down and get people to think about that. And I use that analogy because you can apply it to whatever relevant to you. You know?
School, work, anything,
Yeah.
and applying what you just said to all the big things in someone's life. If they're doing 5 or 6 different areas of life, social, fun, whatever, if you apply it to all of them, it also leaves you room to prioritize. Like,
Yep.
okay, school at this age first. I don't have my own family. I have a future family. I'm gonna
Yep.
study and fall in love. Maybe I'm gonna not goof around, and this amount of goofing around is enough. And so I love that. It's a target of consistency for the most important, and then work up where you can in the priorities.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so
100%.
if they're in the workplace and they're navigating the big company, what's your most practical piece of advice, do you think, for someone that for the next 5 years, the average stay for an employee generally is in the big company? They got the job, they're leading their own work, maybe one or two others. What's your practical advice this week they should do differently, do you think?
Yeah. I think what they should do this week is you need to be able to understand how where you work, how they make money.
Mm,
Understand how your organization makes money. And then when you understand how they make money and who's involved in that, have a networking conversation, like a get to know you conversation with some of those stakeholders
mm-hmm.
because they love to talk about themselves and love to talk about what's happening in the work that you're doing. And what that does is that indirectly shows that you have interest, you have curiosity in relation to like what's going on in your organization. And just
And
as
that you're
simple,
smart, that you get
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and just that simple targeting where you're not looking for a thing, but you're just asking about the business and you're being really curious.
Yeah.
It becomes a multiplier of your brand. And then at a later point in time, if you start making an ask or you show curiosity in a project, guess what will happen? Someone might help you wayfind to get you on that project. Or if that person's involved in a project, you may come top of mind. Like, hey, I appreciated this lunch or I appreciated this coffee chat. Here's some things I was thinking about based on what we spoke about. Would you be interested? And this is the kind of leverage that I think people need to like start to build and
Mm,
stay curious in that way. So it isn't just about clocking in, clocking out. Like
yeah.
you may have deliverables and we got to work on those. But I would say if anyone right now, just if you can articulate how your company makes money and then just talk about that with one of your leaders in some way, it's gonna already from gate start to open up doors and relationships you didn't know could serve you.
I love that advice. I want to just add a couple of specifics to it. I think it's beautiful and exactly what I would do in the very first year of my career way back when. And I think
Hmm.
it's totally missed by 90% of people in the workplace that are not involved with customer facing, not involved with cost savings. I think, if you the sneaky thing that you just snuck in there, that it's also beautiful. In addition to understanding client outcomes and how your organization and the mechanics and the machinery and the IT deliver things that people need, you will discover who they are that are needing this. When you're inside the company and not customer facing, you have no idea really. But if you know and you learn where the money is coming from, like you're saying, and you are asking people both that and where most of the money is being spent, which is usually labor, but second to that, if you're asking curiously, what I've never even really thought about directly in what you're saying is it's also like the most amazing, non-wasteful way to engage in a brand new conversation with a brand new stranger that's up the food chain from you. Like, hey, Miss Sharp, I've been wondering all the time about our customers. And as you know, I don't work in that space. You do. Do you have 10 minutes? I just have a couple of questions. And you find yourself at a follow-up breakfast or a follow-up meeting when they have more time. And you're not asking about movies and sports and stuff that doesn't matter. You're asking about stuff that matters. And wow, that is really good advice. Super good advice. Yeah, I love that. All right. I'm going to ask you to tell us where to find you. How do people find you and access you, and where do they read that wonderful book and all that? Give us your best ad you can for the closing shot.
I got you. And again, I appreciate the platform and the opportunity. For anyone that wants to find me, you can find me very easily on LinkedIn. Just my full name, Kason Morris. And I also have my own website, kasonmorris.com, where you'll learn a lot more about my story, my journey, the principles around what I believe, and different ways we can collaborate. If you're interested in reading the book, it's called Life Work Revolution. It's available on all major platforms. So you can find it on Amazon, Apple. And I also recently just published an audiobook. So if you like to read, get the physical copy. If you like to listen, you can get the audio copy. And then last but not least, you can find my new website, which is called lifeworkdesign.co. And that's where I kind of break down a lot of these principles and a lot of these frameworks in plain speak, making it accessible for everyone. And I have a number of really neat tools which I can share back with you to share with your audience. An assessment tool, a life work navigation tool that I just produced, and as well as a course that will be coming out within the next couple of months. So if you have any interest in any of those kinds of activities, my personal website, the lifedesign.co website, you'll find all that information there. And I look forward to connecting and serving.
Yeah, I want to give you a little positive teasing and a plug for you as well. Like, if you want to go see the kind of bio picture that you should have on LinkedIn, you go see Kason Morris at LinkedIn, and you see that kind of picture. That's what we all should be doing. Now I'm going to get them there. The second thing is life work. What else would you want to be focused on? And the title of the book, like a revolution. Let's do this. I just love that title. What a great title. Kason Morris, thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.